Shalom! Welcome to this week's Sedra. Just as in last week's Sedra, it was a concentration on detail in terms of building the Mishkan, this week we have a similar Sedra. And just like last week, the payoff for delving into all the details of the building of the Mishkan was the imagination of the grandeur of the Mishkan. This week we have a similar idea. Instead of looking at the details of the Mishkan, this week we concentrate on the details of the Kohen Gadol's clothing and how unique they were. And just as the reward of last week was imagining the grandeur of the Mishkan, this week we have the reward of imagining the majesty of the clothes of the Kohen Gadol. This week, take out your Chumash, learn through the Sedra, and really imagine just what it would be like to see on Yom Kippur the Kohen Gadol in all his splendor and all his glory walking around the Beit HaMikdash. If we take a look back to Sedrat Yitro, we found an odd comment. Yitro had seen Moshe, and Moshe was judging, the Torah says, from early in the morning until late at night. Technically, that's an impossibility. One can't withstand that much pressure. And that's why Yitro came to Moshe and said, you need to change the system. But Rashi had a puzzling comment. Rashi said that we learned from the pasuk that Moshe judged from day until night, that one that judges is as if he's involved in Torah the entire day. As long as he's clarifying the truth and he's judging correctly, that person is as if all the time they spend judging and listening to cases, all of that time is as if they spend time in Torah study. It's an odd comment on Rashi's part to make. For how is it that one that spends their time judging cases is really involved in Torah study? I think this week's Sedra we can find an explanation. One of the special begadim, one of the special garments that the Kohen Gadol wore was a breastplate called the Choshen Mishpat that went over his chest. What's interesting, it's called the Choshen Mishpat, literally the breastplate of justice. Yet the Kohen Gadol had no role in the Torah in judging. He didn't adjudicate cases, he never sat on Beis Din. His job, and he found himself in the Beit HaMikdash performing the Avodah. He had no role in justice. So why would it be that the Kohen Gadol would wear a garment called the Choshen Mishpat? And Rashi explains that the reason why you wear the Choshen Mishpat is because the Choshen Mishpat came to clarify things. Now the question is, what did it come to clarify? And the answer is that within the Choshen Mishpat was housed what was called the Urim V'Tumim, another sort of breastplate that had 12 stones. And the 12 stones were used by way of prophecy to determine the future. If Bnei Israel wanted to know if they should go to war, for instance, and whether they'd be successful, the king, through the Kohen Gadol, through the Urim V'Tumim, would be able to find out whether they were successful. And that was a message directly from Hashem. The Urim V'Tumim was there to clarify the future. We can explain that the Torah is also a clarification, not so much of the future, but of what is happening around us and what should be happening, where we should go, and what the ultimate truth is. The same is true of justice. A judge is sitting and clarifying daily whether or not what's right and what's wrong. When two litigants come in front of the judge, he clarifies what's wrong and what is right. If it's a religious matter, the judges will sit and determine what is kosher, what is treif. All of these things that a judge does, he spends his time in clarification. Justice is a clarification. The Urim V'Tumim is a clarification. And the act of Torah study is a clarification of the truth. Therefore, the Choshen Mishpat was so called because it held within it the Urim V'Tumim which clarify the truth, the reality, what the future would be. And therefore it's called the Choshen Mishpat. The judge that sits all day long, explains Rashi, is also considered one that studies Torah, for both are clarifying the truth. The judge is clarifying the truth in the actual, in the practical, in the day-to-day, between two people, what is true. The Torah student is clarifying what is true in the abstract. And what's interesting is that both are considered on equal level according to Rashi. And it's an interesting lesson because we find out that from this week's Sedra, the lesson is that the clarification of the truth is not just in the abstract study. It's not just found in the Beit HaMidrash, in the study halls. It's also found in the practical. And one can come to truths through practical life. It's a novel idea, one that we would consider never left the halls of the Beit Midrash, but we find through the acts of the judge and Rashi's comment about Moshe judging from day to night, that clarification takes place as well outside the halls of the Beit HaMidrash in all of our actions. This week, let's clarify the truth not only in our minds, but also in the way that we act. Shabbat Shalom. Please don't forget to look at the other interesting items we have on our website. Take time to look at Take 10 for Torah. Just be another 10 minutes of Torah learning. I'm sure you'll be inspired to keep on going. Shabbat Shalom.